Hi everyone, and welcome to this breakout session, When Social Issues Impede Local Business Retention, Expansion, and Investment Opportunities, What are the Solutions? My name is Ben Young, and I'm a board member of EDA, and I would like to thank our session partner, the Alberta REITAs, for sponsoring this session. At this time, I'll ask Bev Thornton, Executive Director of Alberta Southwest, to speak a bit about the REITAs and to introduce the panel for our session.
Good afternoon and welcome to this session sponsored by Alberta's Regional Economic Development Alliances. Alberta represents a richness of natural resources, leading-edge technologies, and innovative approaches that support economic diversification. Alberta also offers a unique professional network to help investors quickly and effectively connect with people and resources at all levels of government, business, and industry. Aligned with the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation, the Regional Economic Development Alliances, or REITAs, represent a winning model of province-wide collaboration. REITAs are partnerships of communities governed with elected officials, the member municipalities, First Nations, and Métis settlements. Each REITA operates from a regional office that is the go-to resource for investor inquiries. REITAs actively work with each other to implement multi-regional projects that create benefit for all, such as broadband connectivity, transportation corridors, and innovative technology development. REITAs offer Alberta not only a competitive advantage, but more importantly, a collaborative advantage. Hello, my name is Bev Thornton, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. Natalie Gibson is President of Innovisions and Associates, an international economic development and marketing consulting firm. She is a leading expert and valued as one of EDA's community economic development trainers. She has served as an elected official and has a wealth of knowledge about research, community engagement, and economic development strategies. Zane Abedin works as the Director of Community Development at the Alberta Rural Development Network, a unique position that pioneers the way for rural communities to address social issues surrounding housing and homelessness. Zane specializes in managing research and developing financial strategies and business cases to raise funding for affordable housing projects in rural communities. Zane's ability to collaborate with clients, communities, and organizations has helped ARDN community projects achieve success. Deanne Bernard is the Alberta Rural Development Network's inaugural Executive Director. After learning her science degree in biology and a master's degree in plant pathology from Simon Fraser University, Deanne moved to Edmonton in 1994 to work in Alberta agriculture. With over 25 years working in government, private industry, nonprofits in rural Alberta, Deanne leads ARDN in helping communities navigate the landscape of rural development through initiatives such as affordable housing, homelessness, addictions, immigration, and community sustainability. ARDN assists communities through complicated processes, not to just survive, but to thrive. Stephen Crotty has made his home in the Bow Valley for the last 4 decades, and over that time has become well-versed on the challenges and responsibilities of living in a national park community. After many years in the hospitality and tourism business, Stephen made a career shift in 2009 to join the YWCA of Banff as a Director of Operations. Stephen represented the organizations as a community partner, acting with the Sustainable Housing Initiative and the Alberta Rural Development Network to develop a step-by-step guide to developing affordable housing, a nationally accessible toolkit for communities. Stephen is the YWCA of Banff project manager for the development of an innovative affordable housing complex, breaking ground this April, which will be using shipping containers. We look forward to what we learn from our knowledgeable panel.
Local business retention, expansion, and investment opportunities. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, not only about economic development, but the increase of social issues and how it's affecting economic development. So thank you very much, Bev and Ben, for the introductions. Even before COVID, the lives versus livelihoods tug-of-war existed. Is there a role for government to support both economic development and social development? It's been my experience over the last 20 years or more that they're in two separate categories or silos, and they often don't integrate, and they should. Over the last 2 years, more than my entire career, I have spent time working on economic development strategies that first had to address social issues in order for there to be business retention or even investment attraction. It can't be the lives versus livelihoods anymore. That pandemic has changed this more and pushed it to the forefront, and I think that's a good thing. Community economic development should be practiced with the objective of integrating and enabling all residents as contributors to the community. In order to be sustainable, social development is where we invest in the people, and economic development supports this investment. There needs to be more centralized coordination between the various departments, community leaders, and decision makers. Community economic development traditionally has three stools or three components to it. The first, in the top left-hand side, is economic development. This is business, industry, government policies, procedures, entrepreneur development, and infrastructure. This is primarily where economic development practitioners and elected officials look at as the income generating part of society. However, this shouldn't be the case any longer. Social development, on the top right-hand side includes some of your biggest employers in a community or region: municipal, academic, schools, and hospitals. Within this are the programs that support childcare, housing, labor, transportation. And then the third part of the three-legged stool or pillars of economic development is environmental protection. Environmental protection is the access to clean air, water, and soil. Now picture a three-legged stool. If one of these three components is challenged with an economic downturn or lack of affordable housing or contaminated site or fires or floods, if any one of the three-legged stool is affected, all of the others are negatively affected as well. When there is balance between the three legs or the pillars of economic development, the centerpiece is the outcome. It is quality of life. It is the ability for the community to be sustainable and for all individuals in the community to participate as the community. When I look at business cases with terms to the right-hand side or the social development component, if the average house price is $800,000 to $1 million, and the community is focused on tourism as their economic engine, and a number of their employees are entry-level positions or seasonal, the question is where and who should provide the housing. I'm pleased to be on a panel today to discuss, or for them to further discuss, how these opportunities can be shifted and for social development components to in fact support business retention and expansion. Traditional economic development strategies from my world start with business retention, who's in your backyard, investment attraction. It could be broadband, it could be workforce. There's dozens of economic strategies that support through the lens of business. Now more than ever, I encourage collaboration with social enterprise and social organizations to also take a look at our economic development strategies with consideration of social components, whether it be housing or transportation, whether it be childcare or health and wellness of the community. Over the last few years, as I did business interviews, or last year, as I did business interviews, if I combine several projects together, I found the number one issue stated by businesses in those three projects as number one issue was attaining affordable housing or attainable housing for their staff. In some cases, the community infrastructure was so strapped for housing stock along the continuum that the businesses actually purchased property in and around the community and rented it out to their staff. The number two issue that was listed most frequently was access to skilled workers and those workers having access to childcare. So childcare for the employer as well as the employee. And in some cases, qualified individuals turned down positions in these communities because they were not able to access childcare. And the third most common issue I saw, or that businesses raised, was lack of access to market due to logistics. This could be less than load shipping, it could be storage, it could be access to roads, rails, runways, or pipelines, something on a broader scale that tied to infrastructure, but was absolutely critical to that business operating within that community. That may or may not tie to a social issue directly, but indirectly, it opens the opportunity to offer more Class 1 truck drivers training programs for 18-wheel trucks or business opportunities for storage. So the course is tied to the education component. We know from experience, 80 to 90% of new investment comes from your existing business community. This is why it's so important to have the data that shows you what is occurring, both from a business perspective and a social perspective. And my colleague from Banff will share with you on their social needs assessment and how they've built on that data to expand on a business case that is now very supportive in their community. As economic development practitioners, we are used to dealing with our traditional partners. Our businesses are elected officials, municipal schools, hospitals, business development organizations. It's not been very often that I had a social organizations that tied to housing or childcare at the table with business development organizations. But now is the time to collaborate and build those public-private partnerships to begin to work more frequently with what I term non-traditional partners. Who is in your backyard providing a service that indirectly supports business retention and expansion? And again, this ties to qualitative and quantitative data. This particular diagram, there could be 15 offshoots of who else should be at the table for discussion. This is just at a 30,000 foot view. But what your data will begin to show is specifically what trends or gaps exist from a social perspective in your community. In my experience, the move from theory to application is challenging. We can talk about integrating social organizations and planning into our economic development three-legged stool. However, the application is more challenging, especially when it comes to things like building affordable housing. And the developers in a community say, no, council should not get involved in building affordable housing. That is for development, public versus private. We have some really good examples today of how to think outside the box and move these theories into application, leveraging partnerships as a new way to integrate planning aspects into non-traditional partnerships. Deanne is with Rural Development Network and can cover how non-traditional partners can move implementation into a new community development focus. Deanne?
Thank you, Natalie. We have seen from Natalie that the three pillars, economic, social, and environmental, are interconnected. RDN's portion of this presentation will focus on how unaddressed social issues can impede business attraction, growth, and investment in our communities, and a few ways to potentially mitigate some of those barriers. We need to stop ignoring social issues, look them right in the proverbial eye, and understand and address them in a holistic and efficient way. Addressing social issues can actually spur investment and create opportunities in a community. Let's take a look at how that can work. I want to start by telling you a little about the Alberta Rural Development Network. First off, I'm pleased to share with you that we recently rebranded to the Rural Development Network, and we are still transitioning to our new identity. The ARDN was created in 2009 through a voluntary partnership of Alberta's 21 public post-secondary institutions. We are a not-for-profit organization. Since our inception, we have been committed to addressing key issues in rural communities at the local level. It all started with a finite fund that we distributed to grassroots projects across the province, and we've since grown into a key resource for rural communities to work together on issues that are generally under-addressed. Our work includes advocacy on broader issues, and we work closely with others to amplify the collective voice of rural communities, to foster community revitalization and improve the quality of life for rural Albertans and Canadians. The RDN's primary initiatives are dedicated to supporting communities in addressing their needs for things like affordable housing, preventing and ending homelessness, attracting and supporting newcomers, increasing access to services, and developing agri-food initiatives. We also offer development services and equip communities and community-based organizations with the tools, information, and expertise they need to jumpstart the projects their communities want. We help identify and access funding to support project development and implementation, guiding proponents through funding applications or even preparing them ourselves. And now I'm pleased to turn things over to my colleague Zain Abedin, RDN's Director of Community Development.
Thank you, Deanne, for giving an overview on who we are. In our presentation, we will tell you a bit about our journey to help communities achieve sustainability as per Natalie's three-legged stool. Along the journey, we were able to identify new social issues that impede local business retention, expansion, and investment. And we will talk about the programs, solutions, and tools we created and are creating to help communities like yours. Our presentation will also highlight why everything is interconnected and there is a need for community integration and how we have been able to support them. Around 2015, we launched an expression of interest in rural communities to see what else can ARDN help communities with. At that time, we heard from over 35 communities requesting support to build affordable housing. Communities said that they need affordable housing, they just don't know how to develop it. How do we access funding? What are the next steps? Not knowing how big this need will become in the near future and how big of a role this plays in the three-legged stool, we decided to launch a program called the Sustainable Housing Initiative. The Sustainable Housing Initiative to help communities develop affordable housing. We wanted to support communities in their efforts to build affordable housing that will be financially sustainable. Slowly and gradually, we started making a positive impact in a number of communities across Alberta. And last year, we also launched a step-by-step guide for communities to develop affordable housing themselves if they have the capacity. The guide is available for free in English or French if anyone wants to use it. One of the communities we worked with is Banff, where we were able to contribute to YWCA Banff's efforts in building affordable housing. More on this when Steve Crotty presents later. So in 2017, CMHC launched their National Housing Strategy, a $55 billion fund committed to provide a home to every single individual in Canada by 2030. This is where things became more interesting and the three-legged approach started taking shape for us. This housing continuum was released by CMHC when they launched the National Housing Strategy. As you might be aware, it is difficult to prove the financial viability of an affordable or social housing project. due to the low rents and its effects on the bottom line of the project. CMHC proposed to create a mixed market development to ensure viability of social housing projects. What that means is that within the same building, create some affordable rental housing units, some market rental units, and even commercial spaces at times. The profit from the market units and the commercial spaces will automatically subsidize the affordable housing units, making it completely self-sustainable. So my question to you is, when the social housing units are looking for support from the market housing units to become viable, why is market not using social development as a potential solution to help solve their issues? Why can't we give and take? Why can't economic development, business, industry, entrepreneurs benefit from social development, schools, transportation, housing, labor force, etc.? Think about it. We'll talk about it in a bit. This is an example of a project in Tabor where they are developing 21 affordable rental units and 11 market rental units. The building has been designed to be self-sustainable financially. So in the last slide, I mentioned why economic development does not think about benefiting from social development. While working on different projects over the years, one thing that we have heard a few times, and Natalie also mentioned this, and you might have also heard this, is that industries are unable to establish in some communities due to limited housing for employees. Even though they want to move in those communities and be there for various other benefits, limited housing options just impedes development. Then when we try to develop affordable housing to help with economic development, we heard not only from the locals, but also from some funding agencies that there is no need for affordable housing in rural communities. And so those communities were unable to receive any funding to build affordable housing, which would effectively help with economic development. This no need is due to the availability of limited data. No data means no need means no funding meant no housing meant you can't attract businesses or even people to move in the shrinking community. This leads me to our next initiative I want to discuss, the rural homelessness estimation that we started to capture the missing data in rural communities to highlight the need for housing and services by the most vulnerable in our rural communities. If we don't help the weakest amongst us, we as a community will never become strong. ARDN launched a step-by-step guide to estimate rural homelessness. Next slide, please. ARDN launched a step-by-step guide to estimate rural homelessness to help communities gather the missing data to identify gaps and attract investment from government agencies and private organizations in the region. The guide is available for free for anyone to use. We also launched a database to provide a credible source for communities like yours to display their data to attract attention. Just to give you an idea of the type of data you can get and you should be gathering to create an impact. I'm going to repeat this one as well. Just to give you an idea of the type of data you can get and the impact this can make for economic development for you, in 2018, we did an estimation across 20 communities in Alberta. From those estimations, we learned approximately 3,000 people in just those 20 communities were identified to be in unstable housing situations. 30% of those people were employed, and 13% were employed full-time. Banff and Canmore had the greatest number of people in need, and MD of Greenview reported the greatest number of people with no sources of income. Imagine what you can do with data like this in your community, keeping the three-legged stool in mind. Now, how does all this data affect community or economic development? An estimation that we did in Conklin, Alberta, revealed that 1/3 of the population, that is 92 people, were in unstable housing situations. The data gathered from this report helped this community access a portion of the $50 million invested by Synovus to help 6 communities build affordable housing in northern Alberta. This is the list of some other communities who are benefiting from the gathered data in different capacities. Till now, we have talked about social housing development for economic development purposes and to attract businesses. We've also talked about data gathering to attract investment and to build that housing. I will now hand it back to Deanne to talk about our efforts in helping you attract people, workers, employees, the labor force to occupy the developed housing and work for the new businesses and grow the economy through rural immigration.
Thank you, Zane. The RDN's Rural Immigration Initiative was created in response to the emerging needs of rural communities, as well as new programs that have cropped up to attract and retain skilled immigrants to rural and smaller communities. This initiative takes a holistic approach to supporting both communities and newcomers, including refugees and immigrants, to help enable successful settlement and integration. This approach really highlights the interconnectedness of economic development and social issues and how you can't have one without the other. Next slide. The overall goal of this initiative is to expand community capacity to support rural immigration and to increase supports for newcomers. By supporting rural immigration from both the community's perspective and that of the newcomers, we can increase retention, decrease tensions, and create better outcomes for everyone. The result will be increased economic development. We do this by engaging with rural communities and immigrants to better understand their needs and issues, providing education and training for service providers so they are better equipped to deal with both the needs of the newcomers as well as the concerns of the community. And finally, we help coordinate efforts to create welcoming communities, because no matter where you are, home is where you feel welcome and wanted. So why should our rural communities care about attracting newcomers? We know many small communities are facing population stagnation or even decline, and there are often workforce shortages due in part to our aging rural population. New government programs are already aiming to increase rural immigration, such as the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot. Successful examples of small communities that have embraced significant levels of immigration include Brooks, Alberta, and Morden, Manitoba. In Brooks, the population has increased by nearly 6% over the last 5 years, largely due to immigration. It is known as the City of 100 Hellos and is now one of the most ethnically diverse small communities in Canada. In 2012, in Morden, Manitoba, their municipal government launched a program to attract skilled immigrants. Since then, the region has had the fastest growing population in Manitoba, at 20%, contributing almost a quarter of Manitoba's overall population growth. There are some key considerations when exploring immigrant attraction, settlement, and retention in rural areas. You need to ask yourself some questions. Are there jobs in the community that could be filled by newcomers or immigrants, both those coming from other countries and those choosing to move within Alberta or Canada? And are newcomers aware of those opportunities? Are other immigrants living in the community? This is a significant factor in newcomers' decisions to settle or leave a community. Communities with immigrants, such as Brooks, are able to attract newcomers through informal community networks. Are there settlement supports, resources, and services available to help the newcomers integrate? Are there affordable, appropriate places for people to live? Are there transportation options? And finally, will the community and employers be accepting and welcoming of the newcomers? We have talked about a number of different approaches, projects, and initiatives. It should be easy to see how everything, especially in a smaller community, is interconnected and interdependent. Like Natalie said, the 3 pillars, or stool legs, of community economic development are foundational and interconnected and need to be considered together. Community sustainability and quality of life can only be achieved by supporting all 3 pillars. A stool needs 3 legs. Social issues impact economic development, and economic development will not succeed for long if social issues are ignored or neglected, and environmental issues impact both. We believe that a community that addresses its social issues along with its economic and environmental ones will grow and thrive in the long term, in part because it will be able to attract and retain happy, healthy, well-adjusted, and productive residents. While the key is to approach community development in a holistic way, how does a community achieve that? We know that all communities engage in planning of all sorts. Almost all spend a lot of internal staff time and resources creating plans, and many spend even more money hiring consultants to write their plans. However, in many cases, plans get started only to be abandoned, or sometimes they're ignored altogether. Yet we know the most successful communities and the most successful projects start out with a clear plan that is followed. It seems straightforward, but it's not. There are many barriers to success. We personally have seen a few, such as personnel changes. When a new council or senior administrator steps in, they may not share the vision. They may not be aware of the plan. They may not understand the plan, or they may choose not to follow it. Sometimes the plan is too detailed. It's overwhelming to read, let alone follow, a 200-page plan. Or it's not detailed enough. It lacks clear next steps, reasonable timelines, adequate resource allocation, or accountability. Who is supposed to do what? And we all know it is too easy to get sidetracked by day-to-day matters that need immediate attention. And finally, there are so many resources and tools and approaches. How does a small community even begin to make sense of them all, or even know about them? Back. So we know communities spend a lot of time planning, but if it doesn't address the 3 pillars of social, economic, and environmental needs, it won't create lasting, positive community impact. It can be time wasted. If it doesn't quickly and effectively lead to noticeable results, it might lose community support. While it's simpler to approach each issue in isolation, what is really needed is an overarching plan that considers all the community's needs, social, economic, and environmental, lays out well-defined priorities, steps, and timelines, and clearly allocates resources and responsibilities. Most importantly, communities do not need another set of recommendations that no one reads. They need an actionable plan that will immediately begin to deliver tangible results. The RDN recently started a new rural revitalization initiative that aims to look at all the different aspects of a rural community to identify gaps and issues and find ways to address them to enable the community to grow and thrive. We are going to work with small rural communities to make them models of rural community revitalization in a way that ensures communities are fiscally responsible and use their resources effectively and efficiently, builds and implements a truly integrated municipal revitalization plan that interconnects all the other plans, including economic, social, and environmental, and implements specific actions and activities that show fast, measurable results. The Rural Revitalization Initiative has 2 key deliverables. The first is a suite of research projects that will create the basis for a comprehensive and holistic community revitalization plan. Then, after documenting the creation of this revitalization plan in a real community, we will take those results and lessons and use them to create a guide, scalable and available to other communities across the country, featuring the experiences of real communities that others can relate to. The first community has signed up, and that community is Hornpain, Ontario. Hornpain is a small community of fewer than 1,000 people located in the heart of Northern Ontario. Its nearest neighbor, an even smaller community, is 100 kilometers away. The nearest major center, Sault Ste. Marie, is over 400 kilometers away. Between 1991 and 2016, their population fell by almost 40%. But they have a council and administrative staff who are keen to tackle all the issues and get back on track. We're looking forward to the results, and we hope to present them at an EDA conference in the near future. And now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Stephen Crotty, who will present a case study highlighting some of the things we've been talking about. Banff, despite its reputation as an idyllic picture postcard community, faces the same challenges as other small communities. Steve will take us through the Banff YWCA's journey towards implementing social development strategies that are interconnected with economic development.
Hello, as our my fellow presenters have already been taking us along a bit of a journey here. That's basically presenting on a new initiative of how we look at economic development in a socio-economic light. I want to take this opportunity to tell you a bit about the journey that the YWCA of Banff has embarked on to demonstrate that theory. The fundamental first step to any strategic plan, even in its traditional methodology, is understanding your current landscape. Our starting point on this journey was knowledge. To that effect, we started by focusing on the town of Banff's community social assessment to understand our space in this microsystem called the Bow Valley. The town of Banff has made a commitment to a very comprehensive social assessment every 5 years, the last being published in February of 2019. This slide represents some of the key learnings that were developed by the town as far as their strengths that show the incredible diversity and advantages of living in this mountain resort, as well as the challenges, specifically the cost of living. Banff is the most expensive community in Alberta. Our sister community in the Bow Valley, Canmore, is right next to it. We also live in a space where we have over 4 million visitors that interact with us and add an incredible amount of stress to our infrastructure for a town of population of just over 8,000. So having said that, there's a number of unique challenges that the town wanted to address to get a better result or better outcome with our residents' wellness. The key learnings that overlapped the YWCA Banff programming were, number one, we are getting older as a community. We are averaging over 35 years, and certainly that breaks the myth of the 18 to 25-year-old snowboarder that is here for a good time, not a long time. Number two, housing is the single biggest challenge faced by the largest portion of residents. 29% of all households spend more than 30% of their incomes on housing. This does not meet the core needs income threshold that we base our median benchmarking for the province. The vacancy rate in Banff absolutely surged to 0.6% in 2017 from many, many years of being 0% vacancy. And I say that somewhat facetiously because a healthy vacancy rate is anywhere from 3 to 5%. Number three, single moms make an average of $19,000 per year less than single dads. Of those, 75% of lone parent families are led by women. And fourthly, 34% of Banff residents were born in another country. No wonder we value diversity. These statistics were eye-opening, particularly when we were looking at them through the lens of YWCA Banff's service provision, specifically in a domestic violence and a housing first perspective. The goals for the community that the Banff assessment set out were fairly broad-based. Addressing the cost of living, being able to meet the world in a place that balances our tourism industry one industry town and trying to balance that community wellness. Clearly, we had some work to do in sharing space because the small footprint that we live in and the densification that occurs here on any given day. And as the largest nonprofit provider of affordable housing in Banff, we also operate the Bow Valley Women's Emergency Shelter as core programming. Our challenge then was how we could incorporate these goals into the community goals. Additionally, our challenge was that we had absolutely no suitable space to serve women with children in either of the housing or domestic violence programs. We had land for expansion, and we wanted to be part of that solution to a greater community need. How can we best realize this valuable land resource to fill both those goals? That made us analyze our programs, and we came to a disheartening conclusion. The system that we have operated for our most vulnerable community members, those women and children fleeing domestic violence, was a well-intentioned Band-Aid. Yes, it's a vital and necessary first step, but it was inadequate for creating lasting change in the survivors' lives. So we had very few options for these clients to integrate back into the community, as all of the previously mentioned challenges from the community assessment were absolutely magnified for them. We were actually reinforcing a system that created its own pinch points and barriers to recovery and independence. So we had to go back to the drawing board and look at the big picture. And we had to start thinking about our place in this bigger system. The critical thinking for socioeconomic or social innovation is to understand all the relationships that are layered into your community and beyond. If you invest in a business strategy that relies specifically on a labor requirement, for example, and that labor pool doesn't exist, then you're going to have adjacent impacts. That bears to mind an example of the oil patch boom in Fort McMurray, which did an admirable job in addressing a number of those key challenges, particularly in the labor shortage, by really having an enhanced annual household income, and also by promoting and bringing to fruition a very massive housing strategy. But there were consequential byproducts of those strategies that had a significant social cost when the solutions were developed in a more narrow-minded or siloed focus. Mental health, addictions, an uptick in family violence were just a few of the byproducts of this economic development. And these are recurring themes in many communities. So that brings us to the idea of impact investing and social finance. How do we measure outcomes? And we don't measure outcomes specifically only in economic development terms, GDP, average household income. We have to find a better way to understand what those true definitions and measurements are. The ability of governments, organizations, philanthropy are falling further and further behind in meeting the community needs for service delivery. We need a fully collaborative, strategic approach, not only to meet, but to exceed and enhance those outcomes for all of our residents. The collective responsibility is essential to improve community wellness. And economic development has a vital role to play in this approach going forward. Just for perspective, in 2012, the annual cost associated with family violence across Canada was assessed at $7.4 billion. Family violence has been on the increase every year since. In correlation, the National Housing Co-Investment Fund was launched in 2018, and it made a commitment to invest $13.2 billion over the next 10 years to reach a target of 60,000 new affordable housing units. Now, I truly applaud this initiative. It's a massive opportunity as housing is recognized as a core pillar of the health and safety of all of our citizens, including our most vulnerable. And the CMHC is a valuable and powerful ally to the YWCA of Banff. But the point is that we will never build enough bricks and mortar solutions to compensate for all of our social challenges in and of itself. So the YWCA Banff's approach to this was acknowledging the things that Zane and Deanne and Natalie have brought into context as a new way of coming into community solutions. We want to build community within a community. So that means that the YWCA of Banff had a much deeper understanding of the landscape and system that we were inhabiting. We were totally incapable of leveraging our land resource for a multiple number of reasons, including the fact that we barely had enough capital reserves to maintain our current campus. So we had to turn outward for help out of necessity. The seed for this project started with a relatively small grant application to what was then known as the Alberta Rural Development Network. And this grant was to renovate a 26-unit gingerbread house. It was the oldest building on our campus, and it did not meet the provincial standards from Alberta Health Services and was in serious disrepair. ARDN's $50,000 grant led to a matching corporate grant donation, which is a great story in and of itself. And that building was actually fully renovated and operational within 8 months. This started a new relationship with an external organization that pretty much has been responsible for most of my hair loss and a good amount of my wine consumption. Thanks, Deanne. Deanne called me in November of 2015 after we went through this first collaboration. And she said, "Hey, Steve, I might be able to get you 40 housing units made up of shipping containers. Are you interested?" Well, sometimes I wonder if I made the right decision, but I said, of course. And 5 years later, I need to tell you that through all that that partnership and hard work over that amount of time, we are currently undergoing foundation work for a 33-unit affordable housing complex that is leading edge in innovative design. It will be net zero, made of modular shipping containers. It will have a complement of accessible units. It will meet well-certified shadowing for aesthetics. It will have a full-time support of a housing navigator that will provide support to a retention-first program strategy. And it also has 6 flex-style units that will be able to adapt to the ever-shifting demographics like our town is experiencing, aging in place, culturally multi-generational family units, and lone parent families. Some of those key critical areas that were not being met by our current modeling. This project has been a textbook exercise in partnership development. RDN, as it's now known, CMHC seed funding, CMHC development fund, CMHC innovation fund, CMHC co-investment fund, Reaching Home, Sustainable Housing Initiative, Energy Efficiency Alberta, and the Alberta Social Housing Corporation have all been realized as partners to make this a reality. I never want to write another grant again. This is truly a replicable and scalable model for affordable and social housing that was specifically designed to supplement the municipality of Banff's own housing initiatives. The town of Banff granted a full development fee waiver that was valued at $152,000. Pretty modest financial investment, but what was critical was that it was leveraged to maintain and meet the conditions for all these other partnerships. And now we have the ability to place a woman and her children in long-term, affordable, and suitable housing with the social supports right at her fingertips. Groundbreaking for the YWCA of Banff. And that leads us to our next aspirational project. The Higher Ground project, to be located in Canmore, is a natural evolution of social innovation through collaboration, partnerships, and social service delivery. It is a remarkable concept for a community wellness hub. The hub model, as Zane had mentioned numerous times, and the mixed unit model is used in so many other facets of community development, most commonly as recreation, arts and culture, educational, like libraries, and retail business models. But it is our aspirational goal to take all that innovation that we have learned from the Courtyard project and incorporate and transfer those design elements to this community social wellness hub. It will bring the full spectrum of YWCA programming under one roof. We will have purpose-built shelter units, transition housing units, permanent affordable housing units. We have the ability to scale up and add components of market housing. It will integrate other social service agencies, co-op counseling space, daycare providers, private adjacent health and wellness themed businesses, and community gathering space. Yeah, this is a really bold, outside the box thinking project. But if you want to break down the stigma and the barriers to access and bring services, community within community, to those clients in need, then this is the new model going forward. And it's going to take us into the future. The Higher Ground project will be at the apex of economic and social development, with one leg firmly committed to environmental sustainability. And it will bring ultimately more of our residents under the tent of community wellness. So to summarize, on behalf of my co-presenters, we would like to just talk about our key takeaways from our presentation. Community economic development must integrate social development into all aspects of strategic planning. Change your systems to work with non-traditional partners in order to achieve community wellness and to achieve sustainability. We cannot create change in isolation. We must all work together to find ways to harness the interconnectedness of life in our communities, to find that sweet spot that addresses social, economic, and environmental needs to create positive outcomes for everyone. And really, size doesn't matter. Your municipality, your community, your organization, your corporations can be champions of social innovation as long as you don't accept the status quo. So I leave you with that. If not us, then who? Thank you all for participating, and we will push this over to Ben for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Natalie, Zane, Stephen, and Deanne for their presentations, and thank you again to the Alberta Readers for sponsoring this session. At this time, I would like to invite you all to a live Zoom Q&A. All you have to do is click on the link on your screen, and we'll see you there.